Hey there, welcome to the Thriving and Wellness Podcast with Haley and Caitlin. This podcast is for women who are tired of just surviving and ready to truly thrive. It's time to reclaim your health and build trust in your body.
Join us as we myth-bust nutrition topics, tackle your mindset, and dive into the nerdy side of women's health. Just a reminder that this is meant for educational purposes only and is not meant to be used for medical diagnosis or treatment. Now let's jump in.
Hello, welcome back to the Thriving and Wellness Podcast. We are so excited to have an awesome guest here today, Amy Beveridge. And I have known her for years. She married my husband and I. And so I am really excited to hear more about kind of what she's doing now after her recent transition in her career and everything. So Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, yes, we've known each other for years because I did get to officiate at your ceremony, and that's because I was a pastor. Well, I still am a pastor, actually, but I have moved away from being responsible for an entire community and congregation, and am beginning, or have been beginning for a little while now, private practice, just working with couples and with families around communication and connection and relational repair. And I have some individuals as well, for people who maybe have relationships they want to work on, but for whatever reason, the people in their lives can't join them in that work, but they don't want to not do the work. So they come and they get started. So yeah, just a variety of people that I work with, but all on relationships and talk about thriving and wellness in love. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to add here too, that's part of why we had you on for this season too, is our theme is kind of shifting. Obviously, as dietitians, we focus a lot on food, which is so important for our health, but we wanted to touch on all these other aspects of health, including relationships with others. And so that's kind of what we'll be talking through today.
So Amy,
yeah.
tell us a little bit.
And I can say that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Oh, we just had a little bit of a lag there. That's okay. I just wanted to say that a big part of the reason why I made that transition into private practice was the toll that I was experiencing in my own body around the stress that it was exacting on me. And that doesn't mean I didn't love my congregation and don't love the work. But what I found is that the more that I worked on intentionally healing the relationships in my life, the better my body felt. And then it became clear that that's what I wanted to work on with everybody, because the change was so profound that I was so much better energetically, and not because all the relationships in my life were in crisis. It wasn't that. But it was shifting a way of being with people. And in that shift, my health improved. And as a result, many other things improved. And I was like, wait a second, people need this. And so it just was a natural, organic step after finishing up my work with my congregation.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so incredible. Can you describe in a little bit more detail, like exactly the sorts of things that you would do when you're working with somebody?
Oh, yeah. So it's a little bit different when particularly, so I'll keep it in terms of marriage. Let's just start with that, but just knowing that I work in other realms. But in particular with marriage, so say a couple comes to me and said, we need to work on our communication. And the big thing, and this is one of my taglines in my work, is people do really love each other and want things to work. It's just they don't always have the skills. And that's true for all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about all the things we get training in, like how to drive a car, training for our jobs, we go to school and specialize in career paths, like all this places where we get training, we get no training in how to be married except from our parents. And quite frankly, that's not always the best training. So
they're winging it too.
It makes sense. Yeah, right. So at some point, we have less stigma now than we used to about reaching out for help and support in our relationships, which I'm so glad for, but there's still so much. And one of the things that I do that's maybe a little different from marriage and family therapy, which is the traditional certified licensed route. I have a certification, but it's a little bit different, is I'm in the coaching space. Which means I don't do a lot of digging into the past, right? I don't do a lot, like if there's a history of trauma and it is unintegrated, I don't do the integration work around trauma, for instance. But what I do try to do is just connect the dots between past, present, and spend a lot of time then helping people figure out what they want their future to be. So in that, I'm very structured. You don't just get to come into my office and vent, right? And I'm not like the judge that sits there and here's one side and here's the other side and then says, oh yeah, you're more right than that guy. So that's not what happens, right? I'm a facilitator of communication and connection. So that means that I do very directed, actually giving people words and phrases and strategies around how to talk, especially about things that bring up power struggles and tension. And I have various exercises that we do as well. Some of it looking at the past, but a lot of it, again, thinking about our future and how the stories that we're telling ourselves right now are inhibiting our growth into the future that we want with our partners or any relationship, as I say. Is that, I can get way more specific, but I hope that's about right.
I think that's
Yeah.
great. And we actually had a question that we were going to ask about why, because I know you're very clear that you're not a therapist, right? You're not a licensed therapist. So
Yeah.
what you do is very different. And so we wanted to
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about the difference. And I think you touched on that a bit. What I'm gathering is that, I mean, every therapist I know is different too, but in those
Oh
situations,
yeah, sure.
they might dig more into the past. Like I'm working therapy right now and we are talking a lot about my childhood or like exploring different things. And for you, it sounds like it's very much more like structured and focused just on the communication piece and like future oriented.
Yeah, I
Anything
would
that you
say
would add there?
I would say it's very, I would say it's present oriented,
Mm,
with the future always in mind, right? So always holding out, where have we been? Where are we right now? And then what do we need to do in order to move into where we want to be, right? And I would say like a primary difference, like I still talk about feelings, right? Which is like
that's unavoidable.
therapeutically. Yeah, I spend a lot of time talking about feelings because a lot of people, well, you know this, they store feelings in their bodies and don't have words for it. And
Mhm.
so I do spend a lot of time unearthing feelings. And some of those are old feelings and some of those are generated by the present situation. But just learning how to language what's already stored in our bodies. And that actually frees up our bodies to take care of themselves and to you don't have to put energy into stuffing stuff down. You can free that energy up for other projects in your life. And most people aren't aware of how much they're holding back and keeping inside. And so again, it is so close. It is so close to therapy, and in that sense of talking about feelings. But I as I say, I spend a lot of time saying, okay, these are the thoughts we're going to work on. These are the messages we're going to give ourselves. This is how we're going to talk to each other. It's very time specific. Like
Mhm.
unlike I think therapists, I will say, okay, we're going to do 12 weeks and we're going to do 6 weeks, right? And this is what we're going to accomplish in these 6 weeks. And then there's going to be homework and there's going to be accountability, right? So it's very structured. And I think that could be a little bit different from therapeutic work.
Yeah, I think that could be beneficial for a lot of people to have more of that structure. And Caitlin, I don't know if you want to say anything, but there was one thing that you pointed out when you were first talking about it, that like there's just so many similarities always, I think, when we talk to other professionals who are in like the health space. And
All
one,
overlaps for sure.
yeah, one thing you had noted too was like a question that you ask is how is your present self setting you up for this future self that you want to be? And that's something I think Caitlin and I even talk about in regards to nutrition, is like, how are you showing up for you say you want to lose a weight, you say you want to heal your gut and do all these things, but oftentimes people are like, what, they almost feel like there's that block that they need to achieve something before they can get there. But it's like, you need to start showing up as that person now in order to be able to do that healing. It sounds like that's a lot of what you're kind of focused on too.
Yeah. I try to set very short-term achievable goals with clients, which I'm sure that sounds very familiar, right?
Yeah.
So literally, like I'll take a couple, and maybe it's for instance, I was just this week working on messages around money, right? So money was a triggering issue between the couple, and so we look back at what money meant in our families of origin and what the messages were, and then the feelings that that brought up. And it often reveals that, in that conversation, what's revealed is those same feelings are showing up in the conversation now. And then we try to come up with what's the new message about money that we can say to ourselves when we feel that trigger arise. What's the new message? And then it's not just a message, what's the behavior or practice that we can now try as a result of having a new message about money between us? And so we'll identify an achievable practice. Sometimes it's spending money on yourself. I'm going to spend money on myself because I deserve it, right? Like, it's not just that I deserve it, but that I care about myself, and I can put myself first to sometimes not always be giving to others. So that's just one example, but that's a very achievable goal. And then I will check in on those things down the line. But maybe it's around intimacy, or maybe it's around resolving arguments. When we feel this tension arise, here's something that we can say to remind ourselves that we're not stuck in the past. We're here in the present with each other, and you're my partner, you're my person. So it's all about messages, and then attaching the achievable behaviors and actions that you can take with those messages that we want people to live with. Yeah. And those baby steps, that gets you towards the relationship vision that you have long term. So I'm sure this completely overlaps with everything you do around eating and what it means and the feelings that come with it, and how you move towards, the health that you desire for yourself in the future. I have no doubt that that's all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that people they really like that structure, and having like, okay, here are my action items and what I'm supposed to be doing. And I know, like, I've seen kind of a few different therapists, and ones that are very action oriented, like that's the way that I work best. And so when it is a little bit more of that like talk therapy, I leave and I'm just like, what
now?
Yeah, like I'm when I got out of this, I just chatted for a while. So I can see people being really, really successful with working with you because of that, like, action orientedness.
I mean, I like to think so. I mean, it works for me. I went through this process myself, right? And I have a lot of conviction around it, because I saw the difference that the model that I use, I saw the difference that it made in my own life. And I saw the difference not just in my family life, but again, how it started to affect my professional relationships. And for me, and this is personal, specific to me, it changed how much I take in from the world. That, I and you all are caregivers as well, right? You're professionals who spend time with other people and their stories, and some of those stories are incredibly painful, and people need you to show up in very intense ways sometimes. And it's very easy to take that into yourself, and then again store it in your body, and then that sort of low grade chronic stress of caregiving takes its toll. And what this model allowed me to do was start to recognize what belonged to me and what belonged to other people, and distinguish between those things. And again, give me the energy I need from my own life, instead of this sort of inappropriate enmeshing with everybody's pain, which I'm super good at. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Caitlin and I can both relate to that. And I know you and I have
Oh my
talked
word.
about like just the pressure
Yes.
of like when you like you were saying in the church, like it's such a large community, that can be challenging to have those boundaries. But and that takes a lot of, I think, courage and practice to be able to set those boundaries and recognize, like you said, what is yours and what you can let go of, but
Oh
that
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be any less empathetic or caring and
No, not at
supportive.
all. In fact, I'm way better.
Yes,
Like,
because
I'm
you
a
have the
way better
capacity
caregiver.
to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
What other like benefit, like overall health benefits do you see either from yourself or with the clients that you work with from improving their relationships and their connection with others?
Um, well, like a big one around family, for instance, one of the things that I see, and I'm certainly guilty of this with my own children, and so parents or future parents, listen up well. There is a lot of times what happens in families, we put so much emphasis on the health of our children and the thriving of our children that what happens is we take our anxieties and our worries, right? And uh, we don't address what's going on between husband and wife that or partner to partner that could be affecting the overall emotional health of children. We think, oh, they must have this or they must have that, or I'm noticing their behaviors are changing and it must be because of this issue going on in the schoolroom or with their teacher. Like we're always looking for answers when our children have hiccups. We're looking for answers outside of the relationship between the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the massive benefits that I saw was the overall energetic, it was just the peace of our household really grew as the peace between my husband and I grew. Our children were clearly happier. And I wouldn't even say that we were necessarily in crisis. We weren't in danger of divorce when we started this process. We just needed a better way of being with each other. And it really surprised us how much our children unwound as we unwound.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that a beginning place, like for instance, if a parent, and I've had situations like this where parents have come to me worried about choices that their children are making in high school, that their children are acting out in dangerous ways, right? Well, it can be like, oh, the peers, right? The peers are the problem. I'm like, well, why don't we start with you two? Let's start with like working on how you two are doing, and then we'll introduce the teenager into the equation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's a very long, sorry, it's a podcast, a very long way
No,
of
it's good.
answering that. But so I would say, if you're bringing down you know, if you're bringing down the intensity in your household for your children, you're improving their health long term, right? So if their nervous systems are regulated in your house and they're feeling at peace, that means they're going to be way less likely well, you know better than I, all the things that can happen down the line once you hit midlife when you have a chronically stressed childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm talking about chronic low grade stress. There are big things, big stressors and big interruptions and traumas that happen to us all throughout life. But it's those chronic low grade things that can really sneak up on us, when we're really good at pushing stuff down, or when we adapt, right? And just learn how to function in those stressful environments as children learn to do. There is a cost down the line. So I
Mm-hmm.
think of health, it's not just mine, it's my children's and their long-term future that I'm also looking after health-wise.
Yeah. I think that's so powerful. And the nervous system thing, I think, is definitely gaining popularity right now, which I think is awesome. So definitely not something that
Yes.
was talked about, at least like when I was a kid or anything like that. So I don't think
No one
like
talked about it when I was young either.
yeah. So we're learning about it now. And
Yeah.
one thing that you brought up a couple times, like you weren't in crisis, your relationship wasn't in crisis when you started going through this. So I have a couple of questions on this. One, I'm
Yeah.
curious if the people that come to you because I see so often that people wait until like things are really bad to seek
Well,
help.
that's the
So,
majority. Yeah,
okay.
that I would say that's the majority. I think I'm trying to think. What I would love, I do have some couples who maybe aren't on the brink of separation, say, right? but they also know that they need to do better for themselves and for their partners and for their kids. And that is, and that, I mean, ideally sort of premarital counseling is where you come and learn how to talk to each other, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. So if there is a nagging sense that, again, my tagline, you love each other, but there's just something not quite clicking in, or the same arguments and tensions are coming up again and again, and they're not moving through the system into resolution, then it's a good time to say, why is this coming up? Because there's something there to learn, right? And one of the things I have, my approach is called Imago. You can look it up. IMAGO. And in my approach, the theory of what I do is that we choose people to partner with who are going to have positive characteristics, things that we had in childhood that worked for us and helped us grow. We're going to choose people like that for our partners. But we're also going to choose people who are going to push at our worst wounds, because those want to heal. Like the universe wants those things to heal, right? So we're going to pick the people that are going to force that growth in us. Or I wouldn't say force, actually, it's a terrible word, invite us into that growth, right? And then we can either choose to do that growth with them. Sometimes we know the growth needs to be done, but we can't. There's good reasons why people have to leave a relationship. But there's a choice, right? There's a crossroads where we can say, it's time to address this power struggle, understand where it came from, and transform into something else, or it's time to find someone else who can do this work with us. I mean, people do have to ask that sometimes.
Yeah, the tough questions.
But I will say this about crisis. I will say this. A lot of times, and I am newer at this, so take it for what it is. I'd be curious for other coaches and therapists to weigh in, but a lot of times people come in presenting with a crisis issue, and with the model I use, that actually can resolve reasonably quickly. And then you get into the real work.
Yeah.
Right.
But you have to come down out of that crisis before you can really address the underlying issue.
And it's usually never even about that thing. That's just the thing that's on the surface, right? There's a far deeper thing underneath that needs looked at. And that's, I always love that. Like, I love after the first or second session, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're done with that. Now we get to the real deal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true for so many aspects in health. Like, some people come to us with like some hormonal concern, and sure, there might be an issue there, but it's actually a gut issue, and they never would have suspected that. So there's usually something underlying. So bringing it back to kind of like physical health, I know you talked a little bit about your personal experience with that and just having the capacity and noticing that energy change. I'm curious if any of your clients recognize that connection between improving their relationships and physical health, or if that's ever something you discuss with them.
I haven't, but I can share an observation. I'm just thinking of one couple that after a couple months, once their level of trust was restored, and by trust I mean emotional safety. I'm not I don't mean like a major betrayal or anything like that, but once their emotional safety was restored, they were better able to, they started shifting that energy towards discerning what the next steps in their careers were, for example, right? And they started talking about more children, which is a major health decision, and you kind of have to feel good in order to do that. For me, what I notice is that when I have more capacity and more energy, I can make better small choices throughout the day, right? Because my defenses aren't worn down in the same way in the evenings, for instance, which I know is like a terrible time for people and their food choices, right? But when you're feeling secure, when you're feeling loved, when you're feeling like that time of day from 5 to 9 in the evening is not tense, but is a refuge and is peaceful, it's a lot easier to make healthy choices for your body. It's a lot easier to sleep, which, as you know, affects diet immensely. The better your sleep is, right? You're not going to be reaching for those things that give you instant energy. So I do think there is a ripple effect in, again, through big waves, and then also just like this ebb and flow throughout the day as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and I want to circle back to that like chronic low grade stress that you were
Yes,
talking
I was just
about,
thinking
because
that.
so often people
Yeah,
are like, I'm not that stressed, or I don't have that big of stressors in my life, or they're like, well, I'm
right,
really stressed and I can't get rid of these things.
right.
But they're not communicating well with their spouse or their partner, and then
Yep.
that, having a negative ripple effect into how things are with their children and probably with their job.
Hmm.
Like that is a downward spiral. So then improving communication with your partner is only going to like positively improve those things. But I don't think that it's a piece of stress that people recognize when it's not at that like breaking point where it's causing a bunch of problems, and it's just kind of
No.
like
Mm-hmm.
simmering in the background.
Well, so how it showed up for me is that because of the age I was, so like I was like early 40s, mid 40s, right? It's really easy to tell yourself, well, this is just the aging process, right? Well, you don't have as much energy as you age, or you're I'm just trying to think, like my weight levels were different, right? And there were lots of little things. My skin even looked different. Like everything was, and you're just like, oh, well, that's just aging.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, that's just chronic stress. And I was just incredibly shocked that as I improved those things, as the stressors began to lift, how much better I felt in my body, how much more exercise. I think I'm stronger now than I was in college. I wouldn't say I can run as far, right? But just strength wise, I mean, all of it, all of it. And it's so easy in your 40s because of the messaging and because of just everything that's in the culture, just to say, well, that's just age. It's not, I promise you, you know. And I'm sure you just with food as well. I mean, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same deal. You can say, well, I'm just aging. Well, actually, there's a lot going on here. Yeah, your body's just
Yeah.
not putting up with it anymore.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we see that a lot with our female clients, that they're unfortunately dismissed in the
Mhm.
healthcare system, whether it be for age or just the fact that they're female, and oh, this is normal postpartum. This is what happens when you become a mom, XYZ. And so I know you're
Or
not
menopause,
someone, yeah, you're not someone
right?
clearly
Like,
to
oh,
just
it's
like
just
accept
menopause.
that. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I couldn't because I mean, I was ending up in the emergency room, right? And no one could tell me what was wrong. So, like at that, so I was like in health wise, like we had reached crisis mode. There's no doubt about it. Yeah,
Yeah. And you,
yeah,
I mean, you've experienced firsthand, your body will tell you. And I just want to kind of wrap things up here. I appreciate you sharing
sure.
all of this, but like,
Yeah,
if anyone takes anything away from today, I hope that they recognize that if you, yes, food is important, obviously, food and lifestyle is important, but if you feel like you have exhausted all your efforts there, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. Maybe you look at your relationships at home or
mhm,
with your family, whatever it is, and see how that could be playing a part into the rest of your physical health. So I want to give you an opportunity, Amy, to say, is there anything that you'd like to leave listeners with today to either encourage them or maybe give them a specific
yeah,
reflection or exercise, whatever it might be?
yeah. I would say you need to pay attention to your intuition, and you don't need to tolerate bad behavior from people. And you also, yeah, you don't need to tolerate sad behavior. You don't need to tolerate tension in your household. You don't need to tell yourself, well, this is just marriage, this is the way it is, or right, or this is just parenting. Parenting's hard. It's all hard, right? But you actually don't need to tolerate things, you know, being that difficult. There actually are better ways, right? And it is hard to take that step and ask for outside help because we haven't been allowed to do that or told that
Mhm.
we need to. Um, and I would say the last thing is that change actually can happen very quickly. It doesn't take months and months. It really doesn't. It can happen very quickly. And I just want people to know that.
Yeah, I love that. And with the right tools, like you said, it can be
Mhm.
effective. So
Yes.
if people are interested in reaching out to you, what is the best way that they can find you and maybe learn a little bit more about what you do?
They can find me at findthewaythrough.com. That is where I'm at. That's also my Instagram handle, but with periods in there. Amy Beveridge, but I think the best way is findthewaythrough.com.
Great. And we
And I
will
do
include
free consultations. So I will talk to you for free for a few minutes anyway.
Great. Yeah, to get a little bit of a feel for you. I know
Mhm.
listening to this, I'm sure they get a better feel for who you are and what you do, but we'll include all that information in the show notes as well. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming today. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I
All right.
will see you soon. All right.
Yes.